state your name and position here at the Villa Terrace for the
JohnSterr, marketing manager for the Villa Terrace and the Charles Allis Art Museums.
And how long you've been in the position?
Since April of 2011, I believe.
And what brought you to the two museums?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, well, I don't know if it's interesting, but it's interesting to me. I grew up in Milwaukee and the surrounding area and had an opportunity to move to Indianapolis about 12, 13 years ago, which I did, and was down there for 10 years. And when I moved back in 2010, I was kind of in between careers and was just looking for work, and it's not the easiest climate still, but back then especially, to find something. So I was applying for many different jobs, and I started volunteering. And I volunteered, one of the places was with Historic Milwaukee Incorporated, and putting on their Spaces and Traces event, which was being held in River West, which I had lived in that neighborhood in college, and I enjoyed it, so I wanted to get involved with that organization. And I was looking for work and kind of growing my network, and I landed an interview for the marketing job here, and just kind of came up out of the blue, and the rest, they say, is history. So
did you know much about the villa before you had come?
I was at a wedding here before. A good friend of mine got married here a number of years prior to me working here. So I had been here that way. And then I always, driving down Lincoln Memorial Drive, you'd always look up and see the gardens there. And, at that time, you didn't really know what was happening up here. You're like, was it a private residence? Was it a museum? Was it like a club, like the Wisconsin Club or something like that? So it was kind of this cool place, but I didn't really know what happened here.
I had the same experience. I didn't know what the villa was before we started this field school here, and the first time we came in from the front doors was I didn't know it was a museum. I didn't know what it was at all. I just had the relationship from down below.
Right.
The beautiful gardens. It's something of prominence.
So now, as the marketing manager, it's my job to get people to know when they're driving by. So we actually do have signage down there as one of my accomplishments, I guess, minor accomplishments, to get a sign down on Lincoln Memorial, letting people know, it's a museum and whatnot.
What type of events happen at the villa? Could you explain
Well, we just had a charity fundraiser last night for the museums to raise money for our workshops with veterans and with emerging teens. So that's one of the events we held. We had artists and nonprofits create and donate artistic chairs that we then auctioned off to the public at this nice event. Shuli's Catering did a great job with the catering. So it was a great night. I'm not sure how much we raised yet for those programs. So that's one of the events. We do annual tea every year in August. It's kind of a high tea with Rishi Tea. We work with them. So there's a number of cold teas and hot teas, iced teas rather. And it's a really nice event out on the back terrace overlooking the lake on a nice day. It's really beautiful out there. Cookies and tea sandwiches and so on and so forth. It's really a nice event, if you will, for people. And the Red Hatters come out, and everyone's wearing their hats, and it's really cool.
Could you explain to the listeners what the Red Hatters are?
Well, I don't know exactly if I can explain what the Red Hatters are, but exactly what it is, but it's pretty much a group of women who get together periodically and have social events, and they'll go on tours, And it's just kind of a social gathering of women, but they do wear these nice flamboyant hats. Sometimes they're red, so I think that's where the name came from. Not being a member of a Red Hatters group, I'm not sure, but they're all over the place, and they're a lot of fun. We love to have them come into the museums. What other events? We do lectures. Our friends group, they hold a spring lecture series every year, so and they're mainly focused on the gardens. I know we've had a number of other interviews about the history of the gardens and how they came back to life with the current iteration of the Renaissance garden. So they have master gardeners and authorities on gardening come in and talk about different aspects of gardening and home gardening. There are a lot of garden clubs still around town, and there's actually a lot of gardens. There's the Linden Sculpture Gardens, there's the Berner Botanical Gardens, there's the Mitchell Park Domes. So there's a lot of groups out there, and we hold lectures here for that. Coming up next month, we have the Friends Groups holds their gala, and this is every other year that it happens. It happens down in the garden. In the Renaissance Garden there, and there's a huge tent, and there's live music and silent auction items as well. But it's really a toast to the villa and a toast to the garden, in really just keeping that vision alive and to raise money. It's a black tie event. It's $250, I believe the tickets are, to attend. And it's very well attended every other year. There's usually a theme. This year, they're partnering with Alverno College to do a fashion show as part of it. So all of the fashions will be created out of flowers, actually. So it's kind of this neat crossover from the flowers of the garden to fashion flowers. And I think it's great that they're partnering with Alverno College. Because right now collaboration is really the name of the game in terms of getting the name out there and making your dollars go further. So
you mentioned a number of events that are here to raise money for the villa to keep up the grounds. And it seems like tucked in there sometimes there's events just for the public also. Does the villa have a place in giving back to the community, offering people a chance to see the gardens in the villa that would maybe not normally experience something like this, say children, inner city children, or even just public school children?
Yeah, I think you're alluding to our Art in the Garden program, which has been around for about it's been at least 10 years or more. Leon Travante, who's on our board and is very involved with the museums, he started this program, and basically what we do is we work with art teachers at the Milwaukee Public Schools, and they bring their classes to the villa, and they get an in-depth tour, and they talk about the architecture, and they talk about the history, talking about, that their family lived here and a little bit about that, and they go down into the garden and they learn a little bit about the garden. And this is part of that too, is letting the kids learn about seeing things, the little details. Once you kind of take time to pause in a place and spend a little bit of time in a place, there's certain things then that pop out that you see when you're rushing by that you don't see. So it's bringing in kind of that artistic eye to the students, as well as learning about the history and about certain different art history and botany and those kinds of subjects. So really the teachers then can take that and go anywhere they want with it, but it's really ultimately teaching kids critical thinking skills, I think. So then the kids will go back to their schools, and then they'll create artwork over a certain period of time around the villa. some of the artwork. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me, the artwork that the kids come up with. One of them, they painted, they drew with markers these big pictures of the Mercury fountain out in the Mercury courtyard. And it was kind of, I don't know exactly what the instructions were to the kids as to what they would, but it was like, I think it was like, if this was at your house, like if you had a fountain like look like that, like what would it be, like personalize it. So like one of them was like, this kid had like flat screen TVs all the way around the thing, and some of them were like a hot tub, Mercury hot tub. But they were great, they were great drawings, very colorful and very, very fun. So I always like to see what the artwork is. This last time, it was this last one we did last year. It happens in September, October. Was just the artwork was just amazing. And it's really needed now more than ever. It's really unfortunate to see the number of art programs being cut right now out of the schools. And so you would think, well, this program is even more needed now to engage and to assist our teachers. But we're not a substitute. We're not going into the school, and we're not the art program now at the school. So we've seen kind of the participating teachers kind of dwindle because they're losing their jobs. So it's really tough to see that. So it just makes more work for us to engage maybe more schools with that program. But the money that we raise for these programs helps with like bringing the students here, busing the students in. And I'm not sure if I don't run those events. I don't know specifically, but working with the different materials that the kids use and so on.
It's interesting to hear you talk about time being a variable of how we experience something like the villa.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of touches on what we've been thinking about the villa, and I think we can maybe ask you some questions about it, because it'll almost be like your job to sort of think about this idea of the villa in time and how people see the villa, because you get a different sense when you're just walking around the villa, not on a guided tour, than when you are on a guided tour.
Sure.
At any place that you're being guided through. The time difference being that you're paced at a certain time, and when you're by yourself and you're able to wander, you can get into details that interest you as an individual and sort of pull things out from the villa. Do you have anything to say about this sort of experience of time, or maybe even personal experience of time at the villa? Because I feel we've been here for, it feels like a long time for us, this past week and a half, and we've been able to look at certain details of going down to trims and even concrete or stonework outside and such like that. Just small things that we might not see just walking through, because there's so many details within in the villa itself.
Sure.
Do you see any connection towards time and what the villa has to show for people? Are there certain events that maybe bring out this sort of wandering, self-guided tour more than others, that people really fall in love with the villa that way?
Yeah, I think too, just being an Italian style villa really lends itself to this idea of spending time, and it's almost, I mean, it's a very tranquil, people describe it as very tranquil, if not a meditative space, very contemplative space. It's almost like, it's almost like you're outside even when you're inside the villa. And so I think that lends itself more to this idea. There are a lot of great homes. Let's take the Pabst Mansion, for example. I love going to the Pabst Mansion. It's just so meticulously restored, and they do a great job of telling the stories. And, I could walk around there for days. But you're inside, you're in these rooms, and you don't feel like you want to really lean on anything or touch anything because it is so amazing with the time and the work that they've put into that. Here at the villa, you kind of want to, take a stroll. You want to sit on one of the benches, either in the Mercury courtyard or go down to the garden and experience it and kind of take a deep breath. You're almost inhaling the surroundings into yourself when you're here. And then certainly with the lake view, I mean, you can see the lake before you even walk into the courtyard. Before you even walk into the front door, you can see the lake all the way through the building. So that's almost like a magnet that pulls people through. When they see the lake, they want to get right out there and see that view. So I think that the villa is special that way, in that, like I said, even when you're inside, it feels like you're outside. And I think that's kind of how it's laid out as well, being a villa with all the symmetry and with all of the windows and doors leading to different passageways, or the terrace or the courtyard, really lends itself to that. One of the other interviews, they were talking about Mrs. Smith couldn't find anyone to live here rent-free because at least 2 walls of every room are, outside walls. And I think that's kind of to this point of your experience that you have here. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but one of the events that we have in the summertime, every Sunday starting first Sunday in June, we have our Cafe Sopromare, and that's free to the public. It's out in the Mercury courtyard, and we have a lot of people that'll come and they'll read the newspaper, they'll read a book, they'll politely chat with friends. They may be jogging by and they just come in and take a little break. But we have every week we have a different musician or musical group that plays. And for the most part, it's acoustic music. So it's such a really magical place to play. Like all of the musicians that I've talked to that play for Cafe Sopromare, they just love the venue. And we can't pay a lot. We pay, I guess, just enough to get these musicians to play for us, and we're very grateful for that. But part of it for them is being able to play in this venue because the sound is great, it's outside, and the people that come are really interested in the music. And if they're not there for the music, they're there for the whole ambiance. They're not like talking over the music or anything. So it's a very, I don't want to say respectful place to play music, but that's kind of what I mean.
Could you, just because we're in radio world, could you maybe give a description of sitting in one of the tables or where the band is in relationship in the courtyard and whatnot?
Yeah, well, you would, you come in through the front gate and you're in a courtyard of the villa. So you're surrounded by, there's walls all the way around when you come in through the front door, through the front gate. And there is a walkway or hallway going all the way around the perimeter that's covered by the arched passageways. And then when you move in further, there's an inner courtyard that has bushes and paths that lead to the Mercury statue, or the statue of Hermes in the middle. And there's a fountain that he's standing on, so there's water sprays coming out of these copper lions' mouths that are going into a fountain, so you have this sound of water and fountain. So that really adds to the atmosphere. The passageways in that inner part are stone mosaic, black and white stones in a circular pattern. And then going further through that courtyard, you get to the house, and that's where the musicians play. So if you come in through the front gate, on the other side, right in front of you, on the other side of the courtyard, straight ahead, is the main entrance to the home, and then that's where the musicians set up, right in front there. And then on the right, to their right, there is a statue of a, I want to say Greek woman. I don't know if she's Greek or not, but she's wearing the robes and she's holding the cornucopia. And on the left of the musicians, there's a statue similarly that's holding the laurel leaf. And so the Smiths had those there. So the people that they invited into their home were greeted by abundance and with peace. And so it's kind of fitting today that that's the feeling we still get when we enter into the courtyard. But there's birds chirping and flying around. Sometimes you'll have butterflies or dragonflies flying around. And then, there's tables and chairs set up around the perimeter as well, so people can have a place to sit and whatnot. We also offer coffee and pastries for sale too. So
this is open to the public.
Open to the public. It's kind of a secret almost. I don't know, a lot of people don't know about it. We do promote it a little bit. It can get packed in there too, so I would encourage everyone to come down to experience it. But if it became really popular, we might have to think about expanding or something.
I don't know if we need to do so much more, unless you have something to talk about. That's pretty much all the things I wanted to talk about. That, 'cause I don't want to have. We have so many interviews, and
right.
We don't want to talk about the same things we have in the past and the things
Sure.
that you just told us. If you're fine with what we just did, do you have any other comments?
Well, I think I would
bring
like to
up or
just
talk about?
kind of bring up to the present. We talked about kind of the origins of the villa, and Barbara Brownlee talked about how the county has 800 buildings that they're responsible for, and she feels sorry for the county in that regard. And she also mentioned that she felt like more people knew about the Charles Alice than the Villa Terrace. And so I just kind of want to bring it up to the present. And I don't know exactly how this transition happened, but with the villa, the Milwaukee Art Center Garden Club, after the art museum pulled away, they stepped up and formed the Friends of Villa Terrace as a nonprofit entity to kind of keep it going, because they wanted to, they proceeded to put a plan together and raise money to redo the gardens. And so they really, deserve all the credit for that, and we're thankful for all of the work that they still do to maintain that. Then there's a sister museum that's attached to the Villa Terrace, and that is the Charles Alice Art Museum, and that was donated by the Alice family, Charles and Sarah. They didn't have any children, but they had a world-class art collection as well, and so they donated their mansion and their art collection to the citizens of Milwaukee back in 1945, so this was well before the Villa Terrace became a museum. And they had their longtime curator there, Margaret Fisher Ahill, who was there. And then she left, and, so there are these two institutions, and somewhere in the early 2000s, when the longtime curator at the villa left, and I guess there were some vacancies at the Charles Alice, the county decided to marry these two museums under a common leadership. So I think that's important because I work for both museums, and I don't actually, my office is actually at the Charles Alice. We do have staff that work out of the Villa Terrace. So as the marketing manager, my job and my day isn't solely dedicated to the villa. It's now also partly with the Charles Alice Art Museum. And, it's a challenge and an opportunity as well. Our budget, a third of our budget comes from the county. So we get an appropriation every year from the county. A third of our budget comes from rentals, and a third of our budget comes from our membership and from donations. And we're very grateful for our members. Without them, we would not be able to sustain our operations. And as funding and the tax revenue continue to decline, it's more and more of a challenge to make that up. So we're always constantly looking for ways to raise funds. And now, because we're managing them together, we have to raise funds for both. So we run both of the museums on roughly $600,000 a year, which is pretty amazing whenever you say that to people. You both of those museums? We have 3 full-time staff, and we have a number of part-time staff. These are everyone from the visitor services personnel who work at the front desks. They greet you, greet you when you come in and answer the phones, to our rental department, our marketing department, our in-house events staff. So it can be a real challenge to keep both of the museums up and keep both of the museums going. So now, over the last 10 years, there's this interesting interplay between the Friends group, who's the longtime, they used to manage everything at the villa, and they're their own organization that primarily focuses on the garden, but funds and does things at the museum as well. And then you have a Friends group at the Charles Alice who did the same thing at the Charles Alice, but now they are both underneath this this professional management, if you will, structure that really is managing both of the properties. So sometimes that can be an interesting relationship to manage. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, and important to document right now in this time and place. That's how the puzzle pieces fit together. So in my mind, I was thinking about what do we do, and what are we doing to get, just in my marketing brain, what are we doing to promote the museum? All of a sudden I'll be like, oh, we did this. Oh, no, that was at the Charles Alice. We're focused on the Villa Terrace here. And sometimes it's hard to separate that in my mind. And quite frankly, to engage the public, it's sometimes difficult to tell our story because we have 2 stories. And some people really love the villa and fall in love with the villa, and other people love the Charles Alice. They love the art, they love the architecture there. I could go on and on about them, but I won't. But when you become a member of the museum, you're really becoming a member of both of the museums. So that can get kind of interesting of how do you explain that to the members. I mean, it's great for the members, but I would say there are quite a few people that really just come to the villa events because that's really where they're engaged at, and vice versa with the Charles Alice. We do have members that obviously come to both museums for our exhibitions and our events. But it can be a challenge. And then I would say, in my experience, more people know about the villa than they do the Charles Alice. I know Barbara Brownlee thinks differently, and that's fine. But in my opinion, when I talk to people, especially people in the neighborhood of the Charles Alice, I mean, we're 1 block away, we're 1 block north of Brady Street on Prospect Avenue, and I'll talk to people on Brady Street, and they, oh, where do you work? Charles Alice Art Museum. Well, where's that? I mean, they have no idea. They've never been in. These are people right around. There's, all these apartment buildings and whatnot. They don't know that we're there. More often than not, someone's been to a wedding at the villa. Someone's driven by Lincoln Memorial and has seen the garden. So they at least kind of have it on their radar, whether they know it or not. They have some kind of a connection to it, but not so much with the Charles Alice. So I don't know, I kind of started rambling there, but those are the couple of points that I was thinking about.
You mentioned the overall, just call it right now, and usually I'm not going to be on the record for any of this for my questions, but a corporate cloud that's hanging over the two, and it's kind of two separate organizations, the Villa and the Charles Alice. Is that because this is for kind of my own understanding also, is this because the county owns both of these properties ultimately?
Yeah, so I think the decision was made that if we have one common management of both, that we'll be able to reduce expenses, but then also maybe be able to have some efficiencies that would be able to better manage both of them. So our rentals department, will show clients both. I mean, obviously one is appealing for another reason than a different place, but we have weddings where they'll have the reception, or they'll have the ceremony at the villa, and then they'll have the reception over at the Alice, because when they built the Great Hall addition, in the late 90s at the Charles Alice, they have a bigger capacity for sit-down dinners and receptions and whatnot. So that's kind of a benefit to putting them together. We've talked a lot about events. We talked a lot about the families. But we're 2 art museums, and each museum does 3 to 4 exhibitions a year. Right now we're doing guest curators, so we put out a request for proposals and into the community, and we select 3 or 4 of the proposals right now each year, and we work with those proposals to put on the shows. So we're very much art museums, and we're very interested in Wisconsin artists primarily, especially at the Charles Alice. They donated their mansion with a world-class art collection, and they have a number of great Wisconsin painters and artists. Bruno Ernst is one of them in their collection. So at the Alice, it's really dedicated to Milwaukee and Wisconsin artists. Every other year, we do a show called Forward, which it's a juried show where anyone can submit a work of art for the show, and then we select, I think they select roughly like 60 pieces, and then we do a show of what's happening with Wisconsin artists. Currently, we have an Old Masters series looking at historical artists, historical painters and figures in the art world from Wisconsin. And then we do that at the Villa as well, but it might not strictly be Wisconsin artists. For the most part, it is. We're getting ready to do an Afghan war rugs exhibition. A local curator, Anne-Marie Sawkins, is helping put that together. And that'll feature up to 50 rugs from Afghanistan, and it's quite amazing in terms of a decorative art, this carpet making skill and this craft that has been practiced in Afghanistan for centuries. And it's interesting the different motifs that are depicted within the rugs. So the show will be about war rugs, and it'll be everything from pre-Soviet invasion of the 70s up until the present, but a lot of weaponry and tanks will appear in the rugs. They have geopolitical maps that they'll weave into the rugs. So it's not only the skill and the material object or culture of the rugs themselves, but also then the motifs that are being displayed in the rugs. So that'll be a very interesting show. We're looking forward to that. So that's just one example. We also do a lot of work with, or we have lately, our shows with UWM faculty. Our current show here, Chasing Horizons, is one of those shows. Nirmal Raja, I believe, is one of the curators, and Christopher Wiley, faculty at UWM. And it's a group show that they put together with artists from across the country, and they're dealing with this idea of a landscape. So at the Charles Alice, we have landscape paintings from like George Inness and the Moran brothers, the Hudson River School painters, also some French Barbizon paintings, and those were very much these plein air, outdoor nature scenes, a lot of times a bit romanticized nature scenes. So that got them thinking, well, what are current artists doing with landscape? And so that's the current show here. And it was interesting hearing Barbara Brown-Lead talk about not liking some of the recent shows at the museums because they were too contemporary. And I think that that's a healthy dialogue. What are these museums about specifically, and about decorative arts, and what are we trying to do in regards to that? So I think that is an important piece of the puzzle, is the contemporary artists. How are they approaching not only the decorative arts, but some of these other things like landscape, which is a perennial subject just for human beings, but then for artists as well. And then, being that we're focusing on Milwaukee and Wisconsin artists, and so I think it's important to have a venue in Milwaukee where artists that are up and coming have a place to, display their work and to think about work. Not necessarily a place where anyone just walks in the front door and gets a show, but a place where the cream rises to the top, and people and artists that are really engaged with it really have a place that is receptive and open and wanting to nurture that conversation. And a number of the artists that have displayed here recently since I've been here over the last couple of years have created original artwork for the shows and are inspired by the Villa Terrace itself, the Zubair wallpaper in the upstairs receiving room, the grounds, the landscape, the gardens. We had a show previous to this one, or 2 shows ago, Garden of Curious Delights. And it was kind of this idea of the garden as a collection of plants. And so it was another group show, and it was it was like this idea of curiosities and collecting within artists' exploration of their art. So the venue itself, the house itself, and the gardens really do inspire, or has inspired recently, a number of the shows that we put on. So I think that's important as well. It's kind of like the villa influencing the art, and the art influencing what the villa is now as a museum. So I think that's an important part of the story as well, of what we're doing today. Because we want to continue to be an art museum. When the Smiths donated the villa, when Agnes Curtis donated the villa, There was very little furniture, or what furniture they did have, as Beth Chapman was saying, they weren't able to keep in the Great Hall because that's where the big events happen. So the art museum, the pieces that we have in here were donated by community members, but they were also, on loan from the art museum. And the artwork in here is very nice, but we don't have like the Federal Room and the Chippendale Room like they had back then. So then the story becomes, when people come and take a tour or visit the villa as a decorative arts museum, what is the decorative art that is on display? How does that tell a cohesive story? How do you engage the public with the artwork that we have on display? But then also, what is the contemporary art and the decorative art dialogue having to say about what we are about as well? So it's an interesting juxtaposition as well, because we have done a lot of contemporary shows back when the Friends were running the museums. It was much more, as they were saying, focused on antique shows, collector shows, doing the paperweights. The Friends they do a show every year, a mini show. So they did the Russian porcelain egg exhibition. So they have it was a private collection that was on display. And there's nothing wrong with those shows. I mean, they're interesting, and they're showing the history of decorative art. But under the current management, we've kind of gone into what are contemporary artists doing with that.
It seems as if you just stuck to one genre, decorative arts. You would only be speaking to a certain clientele or a certain visitor, and you talked about branching out to different arts and things like that. Do you feel that that path of doing contemporary arts and some of the old decorative arts, or the decorative arts that are here at the villa already, or just the villa itself, and then adding new contemporary things on the interior as exhibiting shows come through, is that a way to branch out to the different diversities of people to come visit the villa and make the villa more popular for Milwaukee as a whole, rather than a certain group of visitors or a certain group that live in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I can't hurt to bring in new people, but I like how Barbara Brown-Lee, and she's the authority. I'm the marketing manager, so I'm kind of on the periphery of this conversation or this discussion, but I see the work that we've done in contemporary art, that we're looking at contemporary decorative arts. So the current, the contemporary or the new or the of our time shows are still talking about and dialoguing about the decorative arts. So when Barbara Brown-Lee talks about Paul Revere and the silversmithing and the objects, and really, we can appreciate them for material culture and all of the workmanship and artistic endeavor that went into creating that object, but it was also a functional object, and so you can really come at it from a lot of different ways, and you can teach and learn about our history and our culture through these objects, these artistic objects. Today, that's a very interesting conversation, because it's my opinion that the decorative arts are kind of maligned right now in our modern world. But we still have craftsmen and artists who are making decorative objects for everyday use, and as objects of art in and of themselves. And so I think that's an interesting line of inquiry, and what I think that we're doing the right thing by having that contemporary discussion. at UWM, they have an art history major, and there's a lot of people studying material culture, and so by doing shows and kind of tapping into that current study on the decorative arts, I think does bring in new people that are concerned about that. I guess the ultimate question is, what's the wider appeal? And if the goal of putting on a show is to get as many people in the door as possible, I think that there's room for discussion whether that's the right way to go or not. But in terms of a serious discussion about decorative arts, I think that it is not only important to have those shows, but it's vital to have those shows. So I see it kind of as in a continuum, and then you have the juxtaposition of the 16, 17, 1800s decorative arts, the ceramics, the tureens, the ironwork, the furniture that we do have here is a nice juxtaposition to the modern stuff that we have. It's interesting. Our current show has photography, painting, video projection, and then it has a sculptural piece made out of packing peanuts, which is amazing. So how do you then reconcile these two mediums and two time periods together? I mean, that's something that on this scale, you really don't see a lot of that. You don't see a historic house museum that's talking about its history and going back to late 19th century, early 20th century, and then having a show where you have a guy who's making great art out of packing peanuts. So I think that's interesting. It's
almost as if that artwork is maybe not appreciated now, and we need another 100 years to come back to it. So it's interesting.
Well, it's
that you're
possible,
showing that
yeah.
sort of artwork now within these older artifacts of great design. That there's this new art here that is being showed that's in the same genre, but not necessarily looked at by some of the art world as equal on the scale of the older 16th century, 17th century, 18th century decorative arts.
Yeah, well, it might be in the art world, it might be looked at upon, but in the average Joe might not see the connections. And I think a lot of contemporary art can be very temporal in that it might not last the test of time, that it's artwork in and of itself, or it's raising questions or asking questions or wanting to stir something up with the viewer, which is what good art should do. But whether it lasts 100 years or not, I don't know if that's even the point of contemporary art. And again, I'm the marketing manager, so I'm on the periphery of these discussions. I don't claim to have an in-depth knowledge or study of art, but in my mind and in listening to the artists and meeting the artists, these are the questions that are raised. So I think that's an interesting point as well. Like, is this artwork that we're making today meant to last? And if so, why? And is it functional? Is it not functional? So,
where do you see yourself in the future with the villa in Charles Ellis?
Me personally, I don't know. It's the first time I've ever worked in a museum, and I feel like this is a career change for me, being in marketing, working at museums. But I've really absorbed a lot of it, and I have my degree is in history, actually, in geography. So I really have an interest in a passion for history. I also have an interest in passion in Milwaukee not only because it's my hometown, but I feel like it has a lot to offer in arts and culture, and its physical environment and space. And so a lot of these different things have come together in this job that have been more of an interest or an avocation. It's now kind of my profession, so to speak, now. So I could see staying for a long amount of time, depending upon, where that may take me. There are other opportunities that come up all the time, but right now, where the museums are at, there's a lot of need and there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that it's important work to get the museums positioned so that they can really thrive for the next couple of decades until the next generation takes over. I think being in part of this field study and learning more of the history of the Villa Terrace, I think we're really at a transition point. The major players and the major donors, players, people that really made this happen as a museum, they're in their 80s, 90s, and they're not going to be around for much longer. And it's really important that this next generation steps up and pays it forward, so to speak, for the next generations. And that handoff from the last generation to the new generation, sometimes there's fissures and fractures because of the different, the art museum is here, and then they pulled out, and then this group came in, and then they formed their organization, and then the county said, no, we're going to do this organization. It's just the realities and the logistics of how it all happened. Sometimes things get missed, and that there isn't this handing off of the baton, so to speak. It's more just like learning by doing, and I think that's what happens too with a professional management that we have now, is that we've had, and I don't know the exact numbers, so don't quote me on it. But within like a 5-year span, there could have been, I think there was like 4, 5, or 6 different executive directors within a 5-year span. Well, what does that do to your organization when you have 5 different leaders doing maybe different things, or hiring staff, firing staff, moving around offices, moving around files, who they're engaged with, what's their strategic plan, what their interests are, what that does to an organization. So over the last 10 years of this professional management, when you're hiring for a job, sometimes people coming into it just look at it as a job. Whereas when you have volunteers, or the garden club that marshaled this place for decades, it's just pure passion that's keeping this going. And there's a lot to be said for that having someone who comes here because they love the place and it's part of their DNA after a while, and they're allowed to have ownership of that. That is very powerful. And sometimes now, like I said, when you have a professional staff, you have more resources and you can achieve more things, but you may get certain people that are just coming to their job every day and then going home. So it's trying to strike that right balance, I think, moving forward, to get people that are also passionate about it. And with the budget that we're working with, we can't pay a lot. I'm not getting rich by no means. I have a second job, a part-time second job. So sometimes you can't attract those passionate people who have a pedigree or a degree, because they're getting jobs that pay more and are doing different things. So it's striking that balance of trying to find people that can come in and are passionate about the place, that really kind of get it moving for the next couple of decades anyway.
Do you think there's a way to grab a younger generation to come in as volunteers through marketing? It's great that you brought up the new generation, because it's switching, and I think a lot of young people now today in their 20s, just coming out of high school right now, have a different mindset than generations of the close past. And they seem eager, and with the art side of the villa, do you feel that this new generation that's becoming adults maybe can work into the villa here,
right,
and work at a close bond with the county workers that are staying at the villa, so volunteer versus paid? Do you think that a relationship could work out in something like the garden club, which is still here but may not be here for long? Maybe can become the new garden club.
Well, I think the Friends of Villa Terrace will always be here in some capacity. I don't think they're on their way out by any means in terms of the work that they do or the passion that they have, but certainly past donors and past volunteers are retiring and are coming back, and I think that part of it is having that generation really foster and engage younger generation to let them know that, okay, it's your time now, kind of like a passing it down. I think that can be really powerful when you can see the amount of work and the amount of commitment and the amount of I don't want to say sophistication, but these people are high up in the community, partly through the work that they've done with the villa, and to have someone like that, to have your elders say to you, hey, great job, you can get into that speaks volumes. It's almost like you're having permission from them to drive the nice new car, so to speak. So I think that's part of it. But in marketing can bring people in the doors. We talk about this younger generation, and I want anybody and everybody to come into the Villa Terrace and pay their admission fee. But once they come through the door, it's basically it's engaging them to become members and to donate their time and talents, if not their money, to what we do here. So the marketing can bring them in the door, but then we really have to foster a relationship with people. And when we talk about the younger generation, I think that people have in their minds, and I think sometimes board members have in their minds like 20-somethings, young 30-somethings. And that could very well be, but really the next generation of donors are, the people in their late 30s, 40s, 50s who are rooted in Milwaukee, that have stable careers or businesses, that have money that are able to donate. So that's kind of really, when we say younger generation, I think that's really that younger generation of philanthropists, of people that want to engage in a more meaningful way. And I'm not saying 20s and 30-somethings can't do that either, and that we're not interested in them, because we are. But in terms of our organization surviving, we need people to become members, to engage over a lifetime. And a lot of times younger people are moving for their careers, or they're in town for college and then they leave. So it's a different piece to the puzzle, I think. You can spend as much money as you want on marketing, but again, once they come through the door, then you have to really sell them on that next level of engagement. So it's like, I have a phrase, ABM, always be marketing. There's that movie Always Be Closing or whatever, ABC. Well, it's always be marketing, because the ads that we put out and the radio spots and the TV appearances, they're going to bring them through the door, but then what happens when they come through the door?
They'll fall in love with the villa.
Yeah, and they usually do fall in love, but then, how are we talking about membership? Do they know that they can be a member? Do they know what the benefits of membership are?
Could you maybe explain how one can step into the villa for the first time and become a member?
Yeah, we have a nice new brochure that we just created. The title of it being "Belong," and that's kind of really the feeling that we want people to have, that when they're here, is that they belong here. And so memberships, I believe, start off at $45 for an individual membership. We have student memberships, individual family memberships, which entitle you to free admission or year-round. You get our quarterly newsletter, which talks about other opportunities to get involved, either volunteering or the events that we have coming up. And then we have successive tiers of membership, which include, curatorial tours, private tours, the Charles Allison Villa Terrace coffee mug. Everyone has to have a coffee mug to give out. So, the higher up the membership ladder you go, the more engaged you are, or can become, with the museums. So, and then we have different price breaks on different events. For all of our exhibitions, members have a preview where they can come in before the night of the opening of a show. There's a time at the beginning of that where it's members only, and they can come and have a drink and kind of go through the museum, go through the exhibition, and speak with the curators and whatnot before the general public comes in. So these are kind of some of the benefits of membership, but really the benefit is that they're really, through their memberships, are sustaining the operations of both of the museums. I mean, it's tough just from a standpoint of all of the maintenance. I mean, that's why, we're here today, is because the Smiths couldn't find anyone to live here rent-free. The heating, now we have the air conditioning, that's another expense as well. Heating, air conditioning, landscaping, snow removal, all of just the normal things. Then you have all of the physical capital projects, we like to call them. We redid the terrace last year. It was like, the quote was like $30,000. It ended up being $60,000 before we were done, because of the drainage tile. It's just like everything on your house that you need to fix or whatever. It's like on a grand scale here. The roof is terracotta imported tile from Italy. If there's an issue with that you can't just slap a patch on that. You have to use like materials. The fountains, the freezing and thawing of winter can wreak havoc on the fountains, the water staircase. There's some drainage work in the courtyard that needs to be done. I mean, the list just goes on, and then you amplify that by the fact that we also have another museum that's 100 years old that needs all the same things as well. So the county is stepping up this year at the Charles Alice and is going to appropriate a lot of money, in the millions of dollars, to do some needed repairs at the Charles Alice Art Museum. So we're happy to see that. It would be nice if we could engage the community on that level, for the community to step up to help defray those costs. Because I think it's important. I think it's important that we maintain these these buildings and institutions, because we're losing a lot of these places. I mean, we're here in the historic Watertower neighborhood, and that's not going anywhere, I guess. But in terms of where the public can come in, all the mansions on Grand Avenue or West Wisconsin Avenue, except for the Pabst Mansion, for the most part, those are all gone. All of the mansions that were around the Charles Allis Art Museum, there's only one private residence on Prospect Avenue, which used to be the Gold Coast, still around. So I think in the future, as we keep moving into the future, I think that these places like the Villa and the Charles are going to become even more important. So I think it's worth investing that money into these places, because they're becoming more and more unique. I could keep talking. I probably all morning on this.
What do we have for an hour? Did you want to mention any? I mean, it's great that we did not stop earlier.
Yeah, right.
But it did bring out a lot of things that you wanted to talk about.
Sure.
They're good stories. Is there anything else that you would like to touch upon? I can maybe help out here too. If I think this story of a new generation picking up to take on is really good. Whether which age group that is or both, also the times being and things are moving kind of fast around us with buildings coming up close by in the area. Brewer Hill, which is a historic neighborhood in itself, which is turning into something that's not historic anymore, very contemporary in the times, and what is that going to be in the future? The Villa, being here is something of a gem, just because, like you said, it's not going to be here forever. Things like this aren't going to be here forever, and it seems like the city doesn't have the capacity to hold on to these things without the help of its community. And we need to think about the future of Milwaukee and the future of our children or someone else's children that live here also. Do you have anything to
Well, I think that's right. I think that we're kind of getting into a broader discussion about what we value as a city, and I think that we do need to value the past. The Smiths were very proud of this home, and rightfully so. And all of our forefathers, for lack of a better word, it sounds a little cheesy, our forefathers, right, 10 years ago. But they were creating these things because I feel that part of it was, their civic pride, and it might have been their ego and their vanity, but it was also their pride that they were creating and building something that contributed to the greater good. I think the more we value historic architecture and maintaining and keeping historic architecture, I think we're really respecting the contemporary, and we expect more from our contemporary architecture. So, having this discussion, I want to preserve the Villa, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that I don't like contemporary architecture or that we shouldn't be building new. But I think if we respect and value the past, I think we'll respect and value what we build today more. And hopefully that what we're building is of a higher quality, both in design and materials, because we respect design and materials from the past. And hopefully what we're building today will be around for centuries as well. When I get down on things, it's when I think about, we've really just kind of gotten out. We don't think in a decorative arts mode anymore. So all of the the gargoyles and the design, the proportions of windows and doorways, and the thought about how people move around and live within the building, when we just kind of have we gotten rid of all of that in our contemporary architecture, and it's really just kind of a means to an end, then I think we're really losing a lot, because then we're sacrificing the historic for something that maybe isn't as valued today. And then what happens a century from now then? It seems like a lot of times we're building like our disposable culture is almost, we've gotten to the point now where our buildings are disposable. We build them knowing every 30 years we build a new stadium or a new arena for the Bucks, it seems. They want to tear the Bradley Center down, or if they want to build a new one. But then we'll have 3 arenas once that's built. Do we tear one down? I think that's kind of a prime example of kind of what I'm talking about in terms of this thing. Northwestern Mutual, they built the I don't know, what is it, 12-story building on their campus in the 70s. They're getting ready to tear that down because it's cheaper to build a new one than to modernize the current one. So, how are they going to build this new one? Is it going to be able to be retrofitted in 30 years from now? I mean, it just seems like we don't have that same value on what we're building today. So maybe, one day the Charles Alice de Villa Terrace will be able to foster these conversations to the greater community, or we'll look back and say, I don't know, but it's an interesting point that you bring up. I see the Dennis Sullivan is out on the lake this morning. That's the sail. Is it a schooner? The Dennis Sullivan? I don't know, but it's moored at Discovery World right there on the lakefront, and that's that replica sailboat. I love it when it's sailing by. It makes me think about Sopra Mare. When they built the Villa Terrace, it was called Sopra Mare, above the sea, and that David Adler talked about how the lake was the villa's Mediterranean Sea. So to have a historic sailboat like that go by, it makes me think about that. But I think that should be good. I'm sure I'll always think of things after the interview, like, I should have talked about that, or I wanted to bring that up. But
you touched on a lot of good things that we didn't get to talk about in other interviews.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like I said, I've only been here 2 years. A lot of things that I've learned, I have a lot to learn about the museums themselves, but the institutional history is very interesting to me as well. So I hope what I had to say was beneficial to posterity and to this project, given that short history with the museums.
No, it was great. I see kind of what you talked about is what we're trying to do, and trying to bring a story out of the villa. And we don't want to just talk about the history. We don't want to just talk about the architecture. If it's a story about the villa, I think a really good story would be what is, we know what the villa was. Maybe some people don't, but we have that little bit of history that we gathered to tell them about that. But what is the villa going to be? What does the villa mean today? Is a pretty good story to talk about. We touched upon that, so I think we're at a very good space to gather our information and go about our research with everything.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You don't have to be awkward. You can talk, Matt. You can turn it off.